So before we kicked on real quick, I don't know if the audience know this or not, but you recently got yourself a sauna and you are going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, well, just to actually, in the spirit of the conversation, Pat, truthfully, I've had the
Yeah.
sauna for quite a while, and it was living in my garage in pieces through the summer because Tennessee in the summer is not exactly a motivating time to build a sauna. So,
Right.
anyway, well, some friends and I put it together a couple weeks ago, and then I had a little trouble getting an electrician to come and wire it up. Long story short, it is now done, and I've been enjoying it in the evening times as kind of a wind down. It's been nice. But, if you listen to the sauna purists, Pat, the barrel design is just absolutely trash. And why are you
Really?
even bothering? Yeah.
So I would think if it's hot, it's hot.
Well, yeah, but I guess the ventilation is suboptimal. The temperature stratification is not great.
Okay.
And then I guess with the ventilation is two problems. The CO2 gets trapped in there, which is not great, obviously.
Huh.
And then the humidity is higher than it should be. You should have like some more steady state humidity.
Oh, I'm sure this is a subculture of like
yeah.
nuance and
So I've been in a deep dive on optimizing my barrel sauna and looking at, optimal placement for the exhaust and the intake and how to set all this up. And
oh, dude, there's got to be a listener of the show that is like a sauna guru. So drop something in the comments for Boz.
No, I don't know if I need it. I feel
him.
like I've read through way too many of these like amateur studies on these guys running their own experiments on it. So, boy,
nice.
But it's
And
fun. It's fun.
Has fitness happened today, or will it happen?
It has not, but we were talking earlier. I got a great one in last night, and then the night before, I did a great one too, Pat.
Really?
So, night before last, I got home late, again, working on a project out on the property. It's taken a lot of my daylight hours. Came home, it was about 8 o'clock at night. I needed to do something, and I'm like, all right, no warm-up, no music, no nothing. I'm just gonna walk straight into the garage, and I'm gonna set the timer. And alternating minutes. On the first minute, I'm gonna do 15 wall ball. On the second minute, I'm gonna do 15 burpees, and I'm gonna try to keep that up for 20 minutes. I failed and did not keep that up for 20 minutes.
I was going to say, what did the 15 burpees fade to for time?
Well, so that started to compound into the wall ball time, right? I could usually get them done within 40 seconds, but once I started creeping into like almost 50 seconds, I had to shave the last couple rounds down to 12 and 12. So,
That makes sense. Okay.
but I just did the whole 20 minutes, no warm up, just right in. And it was enough to get the job done.
Yeah, I bet it did. Good for you.
Yeah.
What is today as we record? It's Wednesday. Yesterday, we had a gross lifting scheme on the back squat. 15, 10, 5.
Okay.
That was it. Yeah. Yeah.
I had to think about that for a second. Yeah. That set
Yeah.
15 is not setting you up for
No, it's not
success.
fun. It's not fun. And I got a wild hair. As we record, this is just about Halloween, but this will probably get posted mid-November. So mid-November, November 15th, that's my 1 year for the hip surgery. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna just test something. And so I got my first set of 15 squats, I did bear hugging a 200-pound sandbag and got him. Barely got him, but I got him unbroken on video. I got him, and that significantly changed the rest of my day. After that, it was just total systemic devastation.
Why am I so tired?
Oh my goodness, man! But also just like a cool testament to. I didn't do anything special over the course of this last year. It was just a workout of a day, scaled or modified as needed. Like literally, there was no additional, well, you're gonna rebuild your legs, you're gonna add in extra heavy lifting? No, I am not. Like it was just, it's pretty cool what one workout a day can do. I guess that's the general theme.
Got it. I'll push back only insofar as, you did do something special. You had a major surgery and you committed to being consistent, and that is pretty special, unfortunately. I mean, a lot of people, that's just not on the table. And so the fact that you did that, and surprise, surprise, you're reaping the rewards of that, like that's pretty awesome, you know?
Sounds like you are telling some uncomfortable truths, even if people don't want to hear it, that hard work and committing to something is not as common as we want, which is kind of the theme of today's show. It's going to be a free-flowing discussion, but basically about truth. Before we get into that, I almost forgot. Appreciate everybody. Help support the show. Go to verynotrandom.com. Check out all the different cycles that we offer. Gymnastics, barbell, conditioning. You got it. And then if you're a gym owner, go to btwb.com. Check out their all-in-one that for gym owners encapsulates billing, class management, and then workout tracking. So check those things out. For truth, I'll lead in with... I'm going to throw somebody under the bus, but it's okay because nobody knows who they are except for me. And it chaps my behind when people are lied to, and especially from places of authority. And I see if you walk into a gym, there is that trainer-client relationship, but they are entrusting in you their long-term health and fitness. At least I hope that's why they walked into your gym, not to decrease their long-term health and fitness, to improve it, hopefully. And in order to do that, let's just not lie about it, there are certain ways that are more beneficial with regards to what you're stuffing in your mouth or what you're not stuffing in your mouth, and then your effort level or lack thereof, or you've got 23 hours a day outside the walls of the gym and 1 hour a day inside the walls of the gym. And if we're going to make any meaningful progress, are we going to act like those 23 hours outside the walls of the gym don't exist, and then we're all wrapped up in this mystery as to why things aren't going well? But so we've got a local physician in our area, where I live in a small town, generally speaking. And this physician, it's physician. So people look to a physician to be the all-knowers of everything to do with the human body. And this individual is overweight, which is another uncomfortable truth that I think you're not supposed to address somebody's weight in today's society because it's like an attack on their character, but it's not. It's like saying, if somebody meets you, oh, Pat, I thought you'd be taller, you're pretty short. You didn't vertically attack me, you stated a fact. I'm only 5'8", I'm not super tall, it is what it is. I could choose to be upset if I wanted to be 6'2", but you stated a fact. This person is overweight, significantly. Another statement of fact is, generally speaking, that's not healthy. These are just facts. They could be a wonderful person. They're also a physician, and people look to them, and this physician's website says it's very relatable. They're sharing their journey. Everyone shares their journey these days, Boz. My journey is this. First of all, you can trust me. I'm a physician. I've tried everything under the sun, and again, you could trust me because I probably know more than you because I'm a physician. I've tried this. I've tried that. Nothing works to get off the weight, and that's why at my practice, we're now offering this wide range of pharmaceutical interventions, not how you eat, not how you move, not how you whatever, and this is going to solve your problem, and this is the only thing that's worked for me. Trust me, Dr. So-and-so. And it burned my biscuits when I saw this, online, because again, since I live in a small town, every time I see this individual, everyone's kids in a small town, they play sports together. You see them every weekend. You see them out in town. You see them whatever. They're just a known partier, a known drinker, a known everything's got like a 7-pound burrito in their hand every single time that they're in public. Never any physical activity happening. And so when your journey that you're sharing says, I've tried everything under the sun and it doesn't work, here's what you should do. I have an issue with that because it just feels not truthful. And that's where I think the role of the strength and conditioning coach, the CrossFit trainer, the whatever, I feel like people these days on social media are immersed in this nonsense world where you're not expected to work hard and make sacrifices and listen to hard truths. And when they come to your gym, I hope from the bottom of my heart, this is one of the places where you will tell them the truth with empathy, with compassion. You don't have to be a jerk about it, but if they don't hear the truth from their trainer, I don't know where they're going to get the truth. So that's my long lead in.
I think that's a great lead in, and I'll add to that because I think sometimes what gets wrapped up in a conversation around telling the truth, and part of that is you almost have to be comfortable positioning yourself as somewhat of an expert if you're going to be telling the truth on a certain topic. so to speak. And so for the coach, you have to have a certain level of comfort that like, yeah, I'm competent enough and well-read enough that what I am telling you is not just based on opinion, but like what I've observed happen, outcomes good and bad, the things I've learned along the way, and that's all informing the process. I think the negative part of that, well, let me back up. So that's a hurdle that somebody has to get to, right? They have to position themselves in somewhat of a level of authority and expertise in order to tell that truth in that relationship. What happens sometimes on the other end is that people take into that is that I can never be wrong. And therefore, I have to be putting something out there that's so irrefutable that I can't make a mistake. And that actually used to be something that I found really difficult in the early days, was like, I don't even want to go down that road because I don't feel like I have enough breadth of the topic to even start putting somebody on the right path. When in reality, it's like, hey man, if they're not an expert either and they're just getting started, those early stages can be the most important, and they don't have to be full of like this entire context. And you know what? It's okay if there's a misstep along the way, either from the person receiving that information or you, the person giving it to them, as long as, again, you come back and you're truthful and you say, you know what? This approach that I was so adamant was the way, I've kind of refined my thinking about it a little bit. And actually, here's what I think we should do as a modification or whatever. So I feel like I'm not intentionally talking around this idea, but I do think that's an important thing to weigh in the mix when you are in this kind of coaching athlete relationship. That, yeah, number one, you got to tell it straight as you know it to be. But number two, you also have to have the humility and the courage, I would say, that when you do have something wrong or you are presented with more information that refines the way that you approach things, that you also come back and say, hey, look, you know what? Maybe it wasn't as much as being I'm totally wrong about this, but I think there's a better way to do it. Let's adjust. That has to be part of that as well.
Yep. I think this is not the Pat Gets Jaded and Cynical episode, but like the world's just so full of polite lies, and I see these polite lies all the time, and I don't know if we're just becoming more aware of them or if they've always been there. I mean, I see it like at my kids' school. Like,
well, can I give you one real quick?
Yeah, sure.
And this is actually one that just jumped out at me as you were reading the description on this doctor's website. We offer medical intervention. Even that statement, unfortunately, is a little white lie for most quote unquote interventions, because they are not interventions in the truest sense of the word. An intervention is a course of medication or process that you do for a short time to kind of jumpstart something else. And that is often not the case in our current medical system. An intervention becomes I am on this particular treatment forever. That's not an intervention anymore. That's something else. And so even that word to me, I don't know what it is specifically that they are championing with this. I mean, I could take some guesses and read between the lines. Like I'm not a dummy, but all I'm trying to say is that even just that little relatively innocuous statement immediately raises my hackles about like, okay, are we really talking about an intervention that is a short course and then you go on with something else that takes its place that's not medically necessary? Or are we using this term intervention as something that's actually permanent and now that's just a part of your life and you're doing this in lieu of these other things that you could be handling via lifestyle? So sorry, that was a total tangent, but I think it 100%. Speaks to your point of like, hey, there's all of these baked in little mistruths in so much of this stuff. It can be hard to navigate.
It's crazy. And it's crazy that we've gotten to a point in today's society where some of these things, which I consider, life or death issues, not to be like over the top, but it's impolite to talk about. One being like somebody's weight, and it's like, well, we should be able to address somebody's mass separate from their worth as a human being. And I think those two don't have to be intertwined. If you really, I don't see how as a trainer or a husband or a wife or a friend or a son or daughter, you can truly care about somebody, which as a trainer, I hope that you truly care about your community. and not want to change course if you see them on a road to chronic disease or an early death, limited mobility, assisted living. If you saw somebody you love drinking themselves to death, even though it would be an uncomfortable conversation and might fracture, or I hope you would say something, because if you truly care about that person, you don't want to see them drink themselves to death. If you really see them eating themselves to death, like fill in the blank, if you do truly care about that person, I don't see how you cannot. You have to have that conversation, quite frankly. Now, ideally, you do it well. Ideally, again, you do it with empathy and compassion, but it has to be addressed, because the truth is the truth. There are some things which, for most people, under most circumstances, most of the time, work. Like, I understand somebody might have some sort of a deficiency, autoimmune, like some sort of condition that affects a small number of the population, and something which works for most people, it doesn't work for them. Fully acknowledge that exists. But if we're talking about the large umbrella of people, and you've got somebody at your gym that reports that they're working out X number of times a week, they're following a strict paleo diet, and they've gained 30 pounds of body fat, your little spidey senses immediately go, something about this story doesn't add up. And another way to say it is, I don't believe you, and I think that you're lying to me. Let's get to the base of what the actual truth is, because that's not the case. Like, tell your people the truth. If somebody comes into your gym, they're like, I have all these goals, and I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I only want to come into your gym twice a week. Yeah, you probably want that extra member, right, for the income, for being honest. But if what they just said they're willing to commit doesn't in any way, shape, or form align with the reality of what their goals are, you shouldn't be like, cool, great, see you twice a week, we could totally do that. You should be like, I hear you, and if you're really, that's what you want to do, let's have an honest conversation, because I think you're going to fall short and be disappointed for these reasons. And again, I think the more of those conversations that are had, the better.
Yeah, or I would say, I think there's also latitude in that example to be very truthful while still framing it in a positive light. So Pat comes to me and says, hey, I want to get in shape in 2 weeks for this vacation I'm taking, and I need to lose, 20 pounds, and I can commit to 4 sessions between now and then. I think it's very realistic for me to say, hey, Pat, listen.
That's my point, yes.
Yeah, it's great that you are going to come and do these 4 workouts with me. And you know what? Yes, it's going to move the needle to some degree. That's awesome, man. You're going to start laying down some groundwork that we can build on in the future. But let me tell you straight up, dude, this vacation that you got coming up in 2 weeks, like, it's too late. The hay's in the barn, and basically what you're looking like right now is what you're going to be looking like in Cancun. So
agreed.
Let's just cross that bridge, and then we can start building on it. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, hey, it's entirely possible to take the good with that dose of truth as well.
100%. Like I said, this should be said, you don't have to say this like some drill instructor out of Full Metal Jacket. Like, this ideally is said.
No, it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Some degree of human compassion. But, it's like a classic CrossFit thing that's addressed, and I don't know if it's primarily at the level 2 or something. You can help me out with that. But, like, another part of telling the truth is walking around the class, coaching people. Like, you don't call something good if it's not good. It could be better. It could be a work in progress. Whatever it is. But if everything's good, then nothing's good. And then when you throw the word good out, it doesn't have any special purpose, because you call everything good. But if you're pushing your clients, you want a bit more for themselves than they do, and you're just always just driving them just a little bit to be a little bit extra, and this was better than it was last time, but I think we got some room for improvement. You go, hey, you know what? That was really good. They're like, oh, I bet it actually was, because so-and-so just doesn't throw that term out. And this can be in the workout. This can be, let's say people love range of motion things, right? No rep. Somebody's not squatting below parallel, and you know that they can. Okay, they don't have a mechanical impingement. It's whatever it is. They're just shortchanging it out of laziness. Hold them to that standard, right? Like, tell them the truth. Hold them to the standard. Maybe you have a client who is not working hard enough. They need a kick in the rear end is what they need. That's what you're there for. You have another client that's a D1 wrestler that he or she needs to be like reined back every now and then, because they've gotten too sloppy and they look terrible, and they're so obsessed with winning that they look awful. They need to be reined in. They have to have weight stripped off the bar, which they don't want to hear. Like, that's you telling them the truth in another way. And all of these things are not easy things to do. But in my humble opinion, that's why somebody's paying you for a professional service when they walk into your gym.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, coaches are really trying to deal in reality, the best ones anyway. And so the more you dilute that, the more you kind of devalue yourself and your services. So I do think that's a really great point. And to what you were saying earlier about just the language you use, you know, this takes me way back. I'm back in high school, Pat, and I remember I had a creative writing teacher in, I don't know, 11th or 12th grade, and she used to talk all the time. And at the time, I didn't really pay it much attention, but she used to talk all the time about the inflation of language and how as a writer, you have to be really selective about when you are really aggressive in your tone or when you're going to use expletives or things like that. Because like once you've set that bar, it's like, where do you go? And using the word good is a great example of that. If your movement is objectively bad and I tell you it's good, where do we go from there? I've set this bar and now it's like, well, is this good plus? Like where do I go from there if you still have a ton of room to improve? So looking at it another way, it's like, all right, Pat's got a squat with a rounded back and it's not below depth, not below parallel, and he's up on his toes, and I call it good. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's true that it's better than where he started, but it's certainly objectively not good. Right. Said another way, what would be more truthful is that if I know that the squat Pat showed me, even in its flawed state, was better than what he started with, it's more truthful for me to say, hey, Pat, that's looking better. Mm-hmm. It's acknowledging the work that he's put into it while still leaving the door open for it to continue down that path. And it seems like such a semantic thing to have to talk about, but thinking in that way can really start to open you up to how maybe you're a little bit loose in other ways, and to include, okay, somebody comes to you for advice around more lifestyle things like nutrition, like, you know, just consistency in the gym, talking about long-term, how often are they coming into the gym, things like that. If your one habit of calling things good when they actually aren't is something that extends to these other realms, before you know it, there's enough kind of wiggle and play in the system that you're not really as effective as you could be. Even if people don't heed your advice, they are not given the option to if you're too loose, if that makes sense. It's one thing to have somebody where you're like, hey, Pat, you know what you really need to do? And you know, you figure out a way to say it that's palatable to them, but you're like, dude, you need to be showing up at least a couple more times a week. I need to see 2 weeks of what you're eating because I'm not convinced it's worth anything right now. It's just all just a trash shoot. You know what I mean? And I want to make sure that in the next month, you're here X amount of times. You know, whatever those like 2 or 3 goals are, you figure out a way to say those. Now, if Pat doesn't take my advice and he just fails to do all of that, okay, well, that's his choice, but he has at least had the option of an informed choice, and he's just failed to do 100%. So. Okay, fine. But 100%. If he's not given that choice in the first place, who's really at fault? I think that's a better question, right?
Yes, and you're right. I mean, without a doubt, if somebody doesn't actually know the truth, hasn't been presented with the truth, you can't fault them for not executing a plan, because they might be going down a rabbit hole of nonsense that if you hook them up to a polygraph, they actually thought was the right path. Like that's just, they're sadly ignorant to what the actual solution is. That's no harm. And then hopefully the truth finds them sooner rather than later. And it is hopefully our job on this podcast, the job of every trainer around the world, you know, to help hopefully get that truthful message out there. But it's hard work, right? I mean, death by thrusters and lean chicken breast, that life is a lot harder than I'm going to sit on my couch and do a quote unquote intervention and the weight will magically fall off and I'll magically be healthy. Like that's a lot more appealing to the masses than lean chicken breath and death by thrusters. And I'll give you an example that you might think is actually a lie. This is a true story. This is somebody that my wife knows. This is a topic that's like particularly passionate for my wife because she feels like, in her opinion anyway, people in the comments can agree or disagree, she feels that like women are specifically targeted with way more nonsense than men. And
Yeah, but maybe, let's come back to that.
Here's an example.
I think it just shows up
like
differently. But
post-kids, menopause, like whatever it happens to be, she's like, there's a whole subset of people that are like giving you these special treatments to alleviate your hormonal imbalance or whatever. And I'm not saying that that stuff does not occur, but probably not at the scale. And so this one poor woman that we know, again, a friend of a friend, her kid's about 10, 12 years old or whatnot, never dropped the weight that she wanted to after that. And again, it's another one of those things where a small town, like I maybe every time I see her, I just catch her at a bad time. But from what I can see, I don't have a mystery as to why she hasn't lost the weight. Okay. I think if she tried the lean chicken breath and death by thrusters lifestyle, something positive would happen. I could be wrong. So she went to this specialist. I don't know if it was a witch doctor. I don't know what it was, but they did all these fancy tests, drew all this sort of blood, hooked her up to who knows what sort of a device, and gave her this beautiful readout as to what was happening and how they were going to get her hormones from out of whack to in whack. And it was very expensive. And then she posted on social media the protocol that she was given by this specialist to get herself into just being a ferocious beast of fitness. And it was, she was told under no circumstances should she, drink her coffee before she has her food in the morning, because they would give her a deadly cortisol spike, and then she would just balloon, hundreds of pounds would just go under her body immediately. So that was a big thing she had to correct. And then she was told to start scraping her tongue after she brushed her teeth in the morning. These are real things that somebody was paid to tell them. Then she has to lay down for 5 to 10 minutes every morning on her acupressure mat that somehow realigns things in her body. Yeah.
I bet it feels great,
she
by the way.
Knocks down a gut tincture. I don't know what's in that potion. She then takes some magnesium, and she's on a whole host of just, supplements that they were given to her. And that's what it was. Nothing about that was like good diet and exercise. I mentioned this to our friend Eva Claire Sinkowski, who runs Optimize Me Nutrition, who, by the way, this is not a shameless plug. We don't get any referral. Like, this is just, a person out there doing good work.
EC is just awesome, yeah.
She's awesome. And she said, oh man, she rolled, I could see her rolling her eyes when I told her. She goes, she's dealt with so many women who have been down this path, and then of course it doesn't work, and they have to come to her to actually change the way that they eat. And she's like, the way these people can tend to make money is they run these huge series of expensive tests, which are largely not required. Those are, of course, marked up at an exorbitant rate. They sell you the gut tincture, the mat, the whatever at a who knows what markup. And then they give you this like huge amount of like daily vitamins, supplements, and potions that you're going to take for several months that are marked up however much. And that's how they make this huge fee. And she said, from speaking to these women, who of course it didn't work for, that it was not uncommon for these women to pay for this service anywhere from $5,000 to $13,000, Adrian.
Man.
So when I say,
business, Pat.
Right, dude. So when I say, but death by thrusters and chicken breast is not going to buy you a house on Malibu, prescribing that. You have to prescribe all this other stuff that isn't actually going to move the needle. And so here is where I think, given the state of what's going on in the United States and America, like, the trainer and the people who are willing to tell the truth about fitness, about nutrition, about strength and conditioning, there is a wide market available for that, from what I can tell.
Yeah, and it's interesting hearing that story because
do you scrape your tongue?
I've fallen off lately. I was really good about it for...
Okay, all right.
No, I've never scraped my tongue.
Well, you could be a beast if you did.
I guess, man. Maybe that's the missing link. Dude, it's so funny. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, you look through each one of those things that was prescribed, and people who are more knowledgeable about those kind of niche interventions, maybe, or habits that you're going to choose to adopt, they might be able to make a case for why each one of them actually is a good idea, and like stand behind it and say, you know what, Pat, you're an idiot.
Yep.
And I just can't believe you'd be that insensitive to suggest that tongue scraping is not a healthy choice.
Ignorant Neanderthal.
But I will say, very confidently that it's irrelevant, because there's so many things that need to be prioritized ahead of this minutia that are just going to be drowned out effectively by the bigger building blocks, that you're not going to see what benefit may have been present with this more niche approach. And so you want to argue tongue scraping good, bad. There's a more fundamental question there that's like, well, what else are you doing on a more regular basis that is either going to set you up for success or push you further away from that state that you want to be in? And if that fundamental question isn't looked at first, then I don't think any of these other smaller, habits are going to really amount to much. And that's the real tragedy in this, right? So to me, it's again, without knowing these particular things, they don't seem to pass the sniff test, right? That's not really what it's about. But I think the bigger distruth, that's not really a word, right? The untruth of it,
disservice, yeah.
Yeah, is not saying, hey, these are the 2 or 3 fundamental things we need to take care of first that are going to have the biggest impact on whether or not you're going to move towards a more healthy state or a more sick state. And without those, everything else is not going to amount to much. That's the conversation that needs to be had. And I think at its root, people, to your point, they know on some level that it's going to take a pretty significant change and consistency with that significant change to really get where they want to go. They want to believe that it's something a little bit easier that will create that effect that they're looking for without actually having to address one of the fundamental problems. And that's tough. That's a tough thing to get past. And that's where that trainer that really is dealing in the truth of the matter is going to have to get comfortable saying, hey, Pat, it's cool that you spent a ton of money literally on a recommendation that didn't do it for you. And I'll tell you what, I think you didn't need to do any of that. And you just needed to address these 2 or 3 things first. That's a hard conversation to have with somebody, particularly because they've already been tricked by something else. And oftentimes when people fall into that, did something, didn't work, and they're kind of like embarrassed about it, so to speak, most people's tendency is not to look at that objectively and say, hey, you know what? I don't think this worked. I should do something else. Their tendency is to double down because they don't want to admit now that they made a mistake and were duped, so to speak.
There's some term for that, actually. And I can't remember what it is. Even if it's like you spend a lot of money on a product and the product sucks, you don't want to admit that the product sucks because you spent a lot of money on it.
You'll rationalize why you're like, well, actually, it's not so bad, and maybe it's better than I thought. Mark Twain, there's a Mark Twain quote saying that, like, I can't remember it verbatim, but something to the effect of like, it's easier to convince a man, oh, dude, it's slipping away and I'm blowing it. But something to the effect, oh, that's terrible. The moment has lost all its gravity, but something to the effect of like, it's way harder to convince somebody that they've been duped than to convince them of the opposite course of action at the outset.
I could believe that for sure. And like I said, just to, I like you said before, that somebody could make maybe a compelling case as to why these things individually do fit a niche need. I believe that. Are there people who are they've got something going on with their health and with whatever it is, that pharmaceutical intervention, like that is the right call? Sure, like I get all of that. My point is, from my humble opinion, I'm open to the fact that I'm wrong. I think far too many people leap down those roads when the 2 roads are like, okay, this one is a road of you're going to have to not eat a lot of the things that you really enjoy. You're going to have to exert yourself and be really uncomfortable regularly in the gym. You're going to have to sacrifice these other areas as well. And if you do that, things will go great. Or you might be able to take this one, which is way easier with regards to an effort level. I think it's just so easy to do that. And I think that a lot of the people who are on that easier path would have got everything they needed from the other one, but they chose not to do it. Either they chose not to do it or they weren't aware of it. And so if you're ignorant to it, again, our goal is to hopefully get that message out there. And, this poor individual that I said a second ago with the tongue scraping and all that, I actually can't say whether, I don't know what her level of fitness knowledge is and her level of nutritional knowledge is. I mean, she might have really been genuinely hook, line, and sinker in this and been taken advantage of, and this is going to change my life, and with the best of intentions went down this road, not saying like, well, I don't really want to work out, so I'm going to do this. Like, she might have just been with a good heart going down that. And I think plenty of people do. And that breaks my heart all the more. I mean,
Sure.
there's not a lot of people that just want to blow $5,000 to $13,000.
Or can. I mean, like,
right, can.
Let's be honest. That's a ton of money.
Yep, 100%. So anyway, I guess, the overall point is, in a world of just quick solutions, quick fixes, don't have to work hard, don't have to sacrifice, and everything's going to go great. The cool thing about our audience, and I think the cool thing about fitness and strength and conditioning and CrossFit, is anyone in that world who is moving the needle in a positive direction didn't do it without some hard work, and didn't do it without some sacrifice, and didn't do it without some discipline. And that's really cool, and that should be celebrated. And it's the goal of the trainer and the coach to help hopefully spread that word to as many people as needed. Tell them the truth, tell them with kindness, tell them with empathy, but shoot people straight. That would be kind of my closing thoughts there.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that there's a real power in that, obviously. And I think that, people are, and I'm not saying this with any judgment, because I believe all of us do it to some degree in our lives, but like every single one of us has some level of self-deception where you're like,
100%.
I can just get away with being a little suboptimal in this area of my life, and you just kind of don't look at it for a while, and before you know it, you open that closet and you're like, whoa, that's a bit of a mess. I should probably address that. Where, if somebody objectively outside of you had said, hey, Pat, you better keep an eye on that, because this stuff's piling up in there, and one of these days you're going to have to answer for it. And you're held to that, or at least it's put in front of you in a way that you're like, oh, you know what, you're right, I've been kind of fooling myself and I need to get on top of this. Okay, now you've got at least a decision to make along the way that's external to yourself. That's something really, really powerful, and that's what the coach can offer. So that's a good thing.
I would say two things. Number one, there's certainly no holier than thou in this. I am full of faults and flaws. Full. And if you don't believe me, just ask my wife. She can give you an alphabetical list. You'll need 10 minutes to hear them all. And the second part is, I think most of us, if you've been around for a while and you have real friends or real family members, there's probably sometime over the course of your life you can reflect on a hard truth that somebody told you that you in the moment did not want to hear, and may have reacted negatively and pushed back and denied and whatever. And depending upon your level of maturity or immaturity, whether it was a month or a year later, circled back and probably went, man, I needed to hear that. I didn't want to hear it. I did not want to hear it. Thank you for telling me. And all I'm saying is be that person.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not easy to do, but it is worth it, like committing and, taking the longer road that does have its own challenges. I just want to say one thing, I guess, on the tactics end of things, because I think that's where a lot of people can struggle when you get into some of these conversations. It's like, okay, I know that this is what this person needs. They need to hear from me, hey, you gotta put down the Big Macs and you have to pick up the, lean ground beef and veggies, but they're not quite sure how to say it. And I think learning to frame these things not in terms of like, okay, Pat, it's gonna be a big sacrifice and it's the harder road to tread. And, you just like, it's arduous, but trust me, man, like that can be a tougher thing to sell, number one, and it doesn't take anything off of you, the coach that's trying to put this out there. Now you're confronted with, hey, this is a hard thing to talk about generally, and it's probably not going to be received that well. So I really believe that framing is an important thing. So let's go back to your idea around thrusters and chicken breast being a harder road. Okay, maybe in the sense that those two actions, like eating decently and working out, like those are not always fun and they're not always easy to do. Fair enough. But let's take a step back and look at the totality of what that gets you over the course of a lifetime. Hey, you know what? You are going to earn yourself the freedom that in your later years, you can do whatever you want. Yeah. You can pick up and go hiking with your grandkids and like, you don't have to worry about it. You can just like at a whim, try out for some rec league, whatever, that you've never played before and step in and be just fine. You have the flexibility to do this. You are unshackled from some of these terrible health outcomes. It's like, man, when you frame it that way, it's like, oh, you know what? Okay, yeah, I get it. It might be a little bit difficult and maybe a little monotonous sometimes, but that trade-off sounds pretty worth it to me. Framed the other way, it's like, okay, you have somebody who's taking the quote-unquote easy road and it's just Big Macs and TV all the time. Fine, that might feel good and be easy in the moment, but talk to me in 20, 30, 40 years. That is not an easy road when you start looking at the disastrous outcomes. It's a terrible road, and it's not one that I would want for anybody that I cared about, because it doesn't end well. And it's certainly not easy when you start getting into some of the complications that like a poor lifestyle can lead to. So to frame it as like easy or harder, it's like, I don't know that I buy that. Yes, some of the actions might be less desirable in the moment, but man, when we're talking about outcomes and difficulty of outcomes, dude, it's not even close.
100%.
In my opinion.
100%.
So if you can figure out a way to distill that and frame that to people and get them to really uptake that, it can make the buy-in for some of these like day-to-day decisions to be like, oh, yeah, that's a no-brainer. I'll do that. And yeah, okay, I'm not going to be perfect about it every single time, but like I get why more often than not I should make that choice.
And I'll give you one more short, real story as to why I think the landscape is shifting, that people who you used to be able to count on to tell you the truth, I hope I'm just not being overly cynical, but that group is fading. Old
man Pat yells at cloud?
Yes. And why it's so important for the trainer or the coach. So I heard somebody's story that this is them telling their own story. They're like, I know that I'm overweight. I'm very overweight. I need to lose some weight. Went in and it was having knee pain. And the doctor was like, well, we really should just get some less pressure on that knee. And they were like, okay, like, what do you mean, like lose weight? And they're like, well, it'd just be good if there was less pressure on the knee. And he's like, oh, well, okay.
What do you mean, doc?
What do you mean? Like,
Spell it out for me.
And they asked again, and the doctor refused to say. It's like, well, it'd just be good if there was less pressure on the knee. And then somebody else in the medical industry, this friend I have who's a physician's assistant, said, sad to say, but not in every hospital, not in every, maybe your doctor's great. I hope that they are. But in some hospitals, the tide has turned to the people that walk in aren't considered patients anymore. They're considered customers. And you need the customer to come back.
Interesting,
and the incentive structure has changed, that almost everybody, you have to fill out a review afterwards of how your experience was, how the physician was, and your compensation or bonus package might be dictated on positive reviews, not actually telling the truth, improving
patient
health
outcomes.
Correct. It's keeping the customer happy so that the customer likes you and so that the customer comes back and stays in the system. And I'd never heard that before. And again, that was from somebody who's a physician assistant. And I was like, oh no, like, I want my doctor to shoot me straight. Like, if my doctor doesn't shoot me straight, who's going to?
Yeah. Well, hey, another great Glassmanism that I really have taken to the bank. And it's feelings that I've had for a long time that he articulated. Greg's got a great way of doing that. You know what I mean? Like, he can articulate something where you're like, oh man, that was bouncing around, but he just nailed it. And he was talking exactly about that. And here's another hard truth. Hey, you don't like the way that medical system is going, and you see the writing on the wall about how it's like, yeah, those are bad incentives for the people working there. And it's really not about like best health outcomes anymore. You know what? You are totally empowered to make decisions to just get out of line for that system. And like that phrase of like, hey, you don't have to stand in that line. You can get out of line of that whole system if you just take a little accountability for a couple of key lifestyle factors. What are you eating regularly? Are you moving around enough with a high enough intensity regularly? You know what I mean? Are you doing what you can to get to bed on time and like try to eliminate unnecessary stress in your life? Like those three things, if you can just take a bite out of those, man, you're going to be so far ahead and so far out of, quote unquote, out of line for that system that it's like, yeah, okay, that thing can kind of crash and burn on its own. I don't have to be a part of it. Man, that to me is like all the more reason that it's enticing for what that's worth. So maybe that resonates with somebody else. I don't know.
100%. Well, I couldn't think of a better thing to end on. I think that encapsulates it really well. So as we always say, everybody, this is all of your show as much as it's my show or Adrian's show. We want to hear your thoughts on this topic. Do you think it's a good idea to lie to people? If so, you're a sociopath. But find this show on the btwb YouTube channel and leave your thoughts in the comments on telling the truth. I mean, because as we all know, depending upon your ability as a communicator, it can go well or it can go sideways. And what have you learned and how have you presented things and all that stuff? Or somebody told you a hard truth. How do you deal with these things with your members, your community? If you have an idea for an upcoming show, post that as well. You can post these things on the Varied Not Random Instagram account on any public post that we do. If you want to have something that's more anonymous, send a direct message through the Varied Not Random Instagram account, and we get those as well for upcoming shows and all that good stuff. So for Adrian Bosman, I'm Pat Sherwood, and we'll see you next time.